people are trying to do and get crazy legislation passed, and it's not not a single thing that's going to make the lives of the people of Alabama better. All it is going to do is further divide the values and the beliefs about everybody. I had a young man in here today, he said, in my office today, and he said something very interesting to me. He said, you all don't seem to understand that there are those of us out here that have needs, but you all continue to bicker about things that aren't going to do anything about fulfilling those needs.
Alrighty, kiddos. Welcome in. It's another fantastic week. Your favorite political podcast. It is Alabama Politics This Week with Josh Moon and
David Person. What's happening, man?
No, not a whole lot. We're both wearing T-shirts, and it both shows you how serious we are about life.
Yep, there it is.
David's got a nice message. I have chosen the Cleveland Cavaliers, and so
are you actually a Cavaliers fan?
I do like the Cavs. I like the Cavs fine.
Okay.
I'm more of a LeBron fan. I'm more of a LeBron fan.
Okay.
But I do like the Cavs. I appreciate that they've had a very, very good season this year. Not as good as Oklahoma City, but still a very good year so far. And would like to see them do well. I always like for Cleveland to do well. So a city that doesn't get a lot of love and doesn't typically win championships very much.
Right.
Yeah. So, hey, before we get into this thing and into the obscene sodomy scandal that we're going to discuss to begin with, let's first tell you about our friends at Wind Creek Entertainment, and I'm really sure they love that little segue. They do sponsor this. It is Alabama Politics This Week, brought to you by Wind Creek Entertainment, and we appreciate what they do for us in bringing this podcast to you, and we also appreciate what they do for the rest of the state. They have 3 great locations in terms of resorts in this state, and Wetumpka, Atmore, and Montgomery. You go there to see them anytime you like, and they great gaming, great food, great spas, great services, great people, great fun times. You got arcades for the kids, bowling alleys for the kids, and the family. Just look them up online. Go online to Wind Creek Entertainment, look it up, book you a stay. I'm telling you, I stayed there at the one in Atmore a few months back. It was fantastic. David stayed at the one in Wetumpka. It was fantastic.
Yeah. Awesome.
It's service above what you would expect to find in the state of Alabama. They know how to do it, which is why they're now, basically internationally known and respected. And they're building casinos in states around the country, including one just opened in the south side of Chicago. So just go and check them out, Wind Creek Entertainment, and tell them, that you appreciate what they've done for the podcast. We do appreciate it, and appreciate bringing you voices that you don't get to hear on pretty much any other radio program or any other podcast in this state, such as today's guest. It's nice to see the Democrats kind of taking a step forward on some of this stuff and getting it out there, getting the message out there. And I think this is starting to catch on. They're having a weekly Wednesday press conference, and they have a theme every week of what they're doing. And I think that this it's starting to kind of catch with people. The more you do it, kind of like with the podcast, the more you do it, the more followers and people that latch onto it and get used to that every week sort of a thing. And, it becomes part of their routine to check you out and to see what's happening. And I think that's going to be something as we go along that really aids the Democrats a lot, and really tells people, hey, look, there are some folks out here who actually give a damn about you, the working class people and the poor people of this state. And they're doing some things to kind of help. And, the theme this week is what they're doing to help families in terms of tax incentives and laws and things, legislation that they can pass. And so we'll talk to her about that. Before we get to her, though, there is a scandal. There's a scandal going on. I shouldn't even call it a scandal. There's an argument. And don't you love feuds? I love petty political feuds. And Wes Allen and John Merrill, our current Secretary of State, Wes Allen, and our former Secretary of State, John Merrill, have a good one going on. These two guys have been fighting, and honestly, this has, if you're outside of the inside loop, I guess, of Alabama politics, you probably would not know that these two have been quietly feuding back and forth for quite some time. Pretty much ever since the day Wes Allen got into office. And, of course, he needed something to say, to hang his hat on once he got in there. And so there was things that he did and said. And in the process, basically kind of took shots at John Merrill and his performance, not directly, but by saying things like we needed to clean up the voter rolls. It was in such terrible shape when we got here. That's not necessarily saying John Merrill was awful at his job, but it's sort of the equivalent of that.
Sure it is.
And to which John Merrill has, had some choice words to say from time to time about the job he did, never really referencing Wes Allen, and by name, but, saying some things here or there. Well, that's all over now. They've gone back and forth, and on Easter Sunday,
of all days,
go figure, John Merrill released an op-ed, to go to all the media around the state. And it began with, until now, I have refrained from commenting or opening the door to counter criticisms in response to the derogatory comments made about me and my administration by Alabama Secretary of State Wes Allen. Since taking office in 2023, Secretary Allen has repeatedly mischaracterized both my tenure and the work of the professionals in the Secretary of State's office. He has overstated his efforts in clearing up the voter rolls, inflating numbers, and presenting a misleading picture of the state's voter rolls. I've stayed silent, not because I lacked a response, but because I believe facts speak louder than rhetoric. Well, maybe. Although I think we've got a pretty.
You're doubting that?
Yeah, we got a pretty clear indication. Currently residing in the White House, that's not true. And so. From there, things have devolved. So I will say, okay, look, there are two separate things here. Okay. All right. And you have to separate those things, and it's hard to do. And I understand completely the double entendre that goes along with what I just said there. Okay. But, so you have to set aside the ickiness of what we know about John Merrill, okay, and the sex scandals and things of that nature, and then consider the job he did in office. All right, outside of the sex scandals, okay, and the job he did in office, I have always said and maintained, was a pretty good job, especially for a Republican Secretary of State in this day and age. I felt like it was as good as we could have expected that job to have been done. Did I agree with everything Merrill did, or the way that he acted towards people at times and the way he responded to criticism? No, absolutely not. However, there were a lot of steps, and one that I always fall back on is there's this push to clear up voter rolls, and we know what it is. And one of the steps that had been taken by Republicans in so many other states was to send out a card to people who they questioned whether or not they were still living at their residence or whatever. For whatever reason they did this, for whatever reason they had a question. And in many states, they would send the card, and this is something Wes Allen is currently doing. They would send the card saying, we believe that, you're no longer living at this residence. If you are, return the card and you'll maintain your position on the voter roll. Nothing will change. You'll be fine. But if you don't send it, we're going to take you off, and then you'll have to prove it once you get to vote. All right. So, I mean, these are small cards that come in the mail. Some people, see it as junk mail or don't even check their mail, or hell, some of them get lost because, post office, they're delivering millions of things every day. And so what Merrill did was turn that on its head and say, here's a card. We believe that this person is registered to vote at this address. If that person no longer resides at that address, please mail this card back. Just stick it back in the mailbox, mail it back to us, and we'll remove that person from the voter rolls. And that, it's a complete, that takes it's no longer a passive sort of thing anymore. Okay. I mean, now you've got to take action to be removed from the voter rolls. And it probably saved tens of thousands of people from being wrongly removed from the voter rolls. Honestly, it probably did.
Right. So John Merrill was not as bad a Secretary of State as Wes Allen has been. That's your bottom line.
Yes.
I don't dispute that. I think you're right. John Merrill, like you, wasn't crazy about everything he did and said, but certainly if you juxtapose the two, there is no question that John Merrill was a better Secretary of State than Wes Allen has been. Wes Allen has been atrocious. Mm-hmm. He's been atrocious. In my mind, he's been bigoted, and he's been flat out dishonest. He has lied as Secretary of State because he knew that some of the people that were being purged from the voter rolls should not have been purged.
Yes.
And yet he allowed it to occur anyway. A callous indifference to voting rights and to civil rights. Mm-hmm. That makes him a horrible Secretary of State, and I might add, a horrible person. Now, having said that, I want to examine something that he said, which also, and maybe you know something about this, Josh, that I don't know. Mm-hmm. And also I find strange and possibly grossly dishonest that Wes Allen has alleged. Okay. In one of his criticisms of Merrill, he said, and I want to make sure I'm going to read this to make sure I get it right, because it's a stunning accusation to me. Where is it? I just had it up here. He basically accused John Merrill of being involved in, of committing sodomy. He used the word sodomy, and now I can't find it.
He had a
here it is. He accused him of being involved in obscene sodomy scandals. Mm-hmm. What is he talking about? I understand John Merrill had an affair, but when you use the word sodomy, that's a very weighted word. Yeah. With some jarring implications, no matter which application you use. What is he talking about?
He's talking about that affair, but I don't know how familiar you are with that affair.
I'm not very familiar with it.
Okay. Honestly. Well, there were a lot of allegations, shall we say, some details that came about during the midst of that were printed, along with some, I believe, audio recordings that went out, or text messages or something along those lines. And those text messages and things were pretty graphic, and there were some butt play. Okay, let me just put it to you that way. All right, there was.
Okay, so it's a reference to anal sex of some sort. That's what he's saying.
Yeah, well, kind of. Yeah, there was a reference to putting certain things certain places. Okay.
Okay, anal sex or some kind of anal sexual activity.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, but this was between Merrill and the woman that he was involved with.
Yeah, it's a consenting adult.
Yeah, and it's the woman that he was involved with, a woman.
Yes.
So when the word sodomy is used, usually the implication is either, first of all, it could be oral or anal sex.
Yes, it could.
But the implication is that there is something that is non-consensual. So often with a child or an underage person, or something that could be consensual between same-sex acts with men.
Right.
You know, using the word sodomy between a consenting, when you're referencing anal sex acts of some sort, between consenting people of the opposite gender, I would argue that's a lie. That's a misuse of the word. That's not sodomy.
Well, look, you know, and that's fine. I mean, I will accept your definitions to it. To me, the whole thing is kind of, you know, I think it's a diversion of what Merrill said, and I'll tell you why. I feel like what he laid out in his original op-ed that he sent was there were some numbers and some figures in there that I don't think Wes Allen can dispute. I don't think that you don't hear me say this a whole lot. John Merrill's right in what he said. You know, with when he was talking about some of these numbers. You know, first of all, one of the biggest grandstanding things.
But you realize that's exactly my point.
Right. Yeah.
My point is this is another example of him lying and distorting facts to give people a false impression. That's my point.
Yes, it is. It is. And, you know, one of the things that Allen did not long after getting into office was remove Alabama from the ERIC system, the Electronic Registration Information Center, which was basically an information sharing group of states. And you know, they tried to make this thing seem as though ERIC was some sort of liberal intrusion on voting, and it was opening Alabama up to some liberal nonsense, and it was all stupid. It was basically the states sharing information about voter rolls, and you know who was where, and so they could clear up the voter rolls. And so then he implements this other system called AVID, which was Alabama Voter Integrity or something, a database or something like that, and it did the same thing as ERIC did. I mean, it's exactly the same thing, except on a smaller scale, because there weren't as many states involved in the thing. And so they weren't sharing the same information, and they weren't doing the same stuff. And, you know, Merrill goes through a lot of stuff towards the bottom of his claim or his op-ed, and he starts talking about, you know, just the numbers, and he talks about Allen claiming that his voter system removed 500,000 people from the voter rolls who should not have been on there. And then he goes through the numbers of this and talks about how impossible that is, because if he had removed this many, then there's no way in the world that Alabama could have had a gain in registered voters. Yet they have had a gain in registered voters. Like 50,000 new voters have come on the rolls over the last few years. And he's right. He's right about this. I mean, it's an absurd statement for Allen to make. And it's another one of those things, like his father before him, Gerald Allen, state senator, where they just say it and they don't expect anybody to actually check it. And, you know, and I think that's what he hoped to get away with in a lot of this stuff. And so then, you know, the comeback from him is, you know, the back and forth on this thing where he talks about, well, while I, along with most Alabamians, were spending time with our families and fellow church members on Easter Sunday, John Merrill was busy sending out an unsolicited email littered with lies and attacks. You know, and that's where he talked about, in that one, he talked about it being not surprising that a man whose time in office was marked by obscene sodomy scandals and repeated lies to the people that he was elected to serve would not hesitate to press send on a false statement. You know, I don't see anything in here where John Merrill lied. You know, I don't in that response that he put out, the original op-ed that he put out, it was supported. I mean, there's no question that we left ERIC for AVID. There's no question that AVID is a lesser system than ERIC. There's no question that Wes Allen has made these claims. And then Merrill provides the numbers from when he left office, or when he got into office, from when he left office, and what they did in terms of voter rolls and voter registration. And then he puts the numbers out there that are current and what Wes Allen inherited. And I mean, I don't, it's just past that, there's just math. And I know we're not good at math, but I mean, It just, I don't know, man.
Well,
It seems like to me now we've got these two who are going to run for lieutenant governor, I guess.
perhaps, yeah. Merrill still is
And
being vague, but yeah.
yeah, and so I just honestly, man, I think that I mean, I think you should. It's so hard because John Merrill screwed this up so bad. All right, I mean, the sex scandal and stuff. This wasn't his first one. He's had a couple. And and he had another one several years back. He had to go to AL.com and sit in the office and talk with them about. And then he had this one. And look, it's all personal stuff, and I get it. Okay, and but he put himself in that spot by first of all lying about it publicly, and coming out and making these claims, and then getting caught basically red-handed. And so he screwed it up so bad that it's almost impossible to take his side on things. It makes it so hard to say John Merrill's right about this, man. And it's just, and so you get stuck.
Well, you're saying it's impossible. You're saying it's impossible to take his side about the voting, about the reality of his tenure?
It's just impossible to talk about what a good job he did in office. It's just because people immediately go to this, to those scandals, instead of what the job was that he did, because he actually did a pretty good job. I mean, he created that whole mobile voter registration process.
I guess what I'm trying to raise here, though, Josh, is that if I were John Merrill, I would play the card. I continue to play the card that he's already laid down, which is, this is something that happened some years ago. I think it was 5 years ago for the most recent sex scandal. He has dealt with his family on it. He feels like he's a self-professed Christian. This is a state that revels, in Christian culture and church going and all of that. He should play that redemption card. He should play that forgiveness card. He should play the I've gotten it right with my family card. And I think he's probably going to be okay. He's a smart guy. And you and I both know we'd rather see John Merrill in office than Wes Allen any day of the week. So yeah. I think he just has to play those cards. And, there are going to be some people who may get distracted by that. But I think if he also continues to point out the gross lies that Wes Allen has been telling, I think he's got a shot at this. If he chooses to run, that is.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's too much to overcome. I think it's not simply that he had a sex scandal. It's the way the whole thing unfolded and the way that it came about. The way that people learned about it, the details of it that came out, and really he handled it as poorly as you could possibly handle it. When they first came out, had he just owned up to the thing, that would have probably prevented most people from ever airing any of that stuff, and would have just basically been exactly what you said. Yeah, listen, I made a mistake. These things happen in life, and I think a lot of people would have accepted that and moved on. Some people wouldn't, but most everybody would. And I mean, come on, look who the president is currently. And so, I think.
Are you saying that he shouldn't run? Are you saying he shouldn't run?
I'm not saying he shouldn't run. I just don't think he's got much of a chance. I don't think he has much of a chance in these sorts of things, because it's just too big of a black mark to I mean, and people just, I remember it. Look, like I said, I praise Merrill for a lot of the things that he did in office. But when it comes to this right here, I just think I think he's got a huge problem. I think he's got a huge, huge problem that I don't think he can overcome.
I think he can, and I think if he wants to run, he should run. I'd rather see him run than see Wes Allen run. I think he ought to at least, I like the idea of there being competition for Wes Allen in the Republican primary. If he chooses to run, I think he's got a path forward, and that's playing the redemption card, playing the forgiveness card. I think that'll play well in this state. I mean, I know that sounds like cynical politics, and maybe it is to some degree, but I think it plays well in this state, and I think that's probably his only path to victory, but I think it's one that's possible.
Well, I think it does play fine. The problem is that he's already used it. And for a lot
Yeah,
of people,
it's.
you
I
know,
don't think
I
that's a
just feel
problem.
like he used it once a while back and talked about how terrible he felt and how, X, Y, and Z was awful and, he shouldn't have done it. And this was, and he's going to have to work on this and work on that and do this better and all that. And then did it 10 times worse. And so
Yeah,
I think that
well,
that causes a problem. And it's just ready-made commercials and stuff and ads and and social media stuff. And so, but
it is, but I still think it's a card that works. He just got to do it, and he's got to sell it, and he's got to mean it. First of all, he's got to really mean it, but then he's got to sell it.
yeah,
I say take your shot. If it's what you want to do, take your shot, John Merrill.
yeah. Well, maybe so, maybe so. But in this particular instance, I mean, in terms of just truthfulness, John Merrill is clearly right about most of the things that he said, and and Wes Allen, while he come out with some really cute phrases and things, the obscene sodomy scandal is a cute phrase, but it just, I mean, it's kind of the
It's a
same
lie.
thing. Yeah, I mean, it's a
It's a
lie.
lie.
It's also just obscuring the fact that Merrill is right about what you're saying, and so, all right, let's slide out of here. We're back in a minute. Alabama politics this week. All righty, welcome back. It's Alabama politics this week. Josh Moon, David Person, and we've gone rogue. We've got a guy that we're not supposed to get. They've told him never do podcasts or talk because he says controversial things all the time, and so we went straight to him. AJ McCampbell, we're not going to tell anybody that you're on with us, Representative, until they hear it. And so we'll just talk and you can say all the controversial things you want to say because we love controversy here on Alabama Politics this week. And thank you for spending some time with us.
Hey, well, I'm glad to have the invitation, and I closed my door so couldn't anybody know what I was doing in here.
Attaway. Well, hey, look, let's just start with a general softball and throw it out, and you can take it from there. But we're at the end of this session now. This is often the time for craziness and things to kind of slide downhill quickly. Where do you feel like things are? What do you like? What do you hate? What's kind of what's going on right now?
Well, I really think we are at that point where things are going to slide downhill. When I was on the floor yesterday, I made a statement. We're at the point now where we just need to pass the budgets and go home. And I'm saying that realistically because it can only get worse in terms of the interaction between the bodies as well as the interaction within the body, because people are trying to do and get crazy legislation passed, and it's not a single thing that's going to make the lives of the people of Alabama better. All it is going to do is further divide the whole, the values and the beliefs about everybody.
Yeah.
I had a young man in here today. He said in my office today, and he said something very interesting to me. He said, you all don't seem to understand that there are those of us out here that have needs, but you all continue to bicker about things that aren't going to do anything about fulfilling those needs.
Right.
It's just y'all out here saying stuff and doing stuff that make you feel good. And feeling good it doesn't put anything on a person's table. It doesn't take care of any of the problems that they are having out here. Our young people are not getting any greater education by the feeling good. All it's doing is providing a feeling for people. And I think the people of Alabama deserve better. And I also think they are tired tired of us just doing those things that make a certain group of people feel good.
Yeah. I don't disagree with a word of what you said. And I don't think most people would. And I'll tell you what's been really surprising to me, has been to a certain degree, you expect some hostility between the parties, Democrats and Republicans, and so that's to be expected. I think every time, they're going to try to do some awful stuff, and you all have to try to stop them, and so that's going to come about. But what has been surprising to me has been the bickering back and forth between the House and the Senate and between the Republicans of there, and I mean, really everybody in the House and everybody in the Senate. And it just has that. What is behind that, and why is there such a problem all of a sudden?
I don't think it's all of a sudden a problem. I think it's something that is historically a problem in the sense that first of all, our rules are different. Right. That's the first thing. When you have a body of 105 and the leader of that body, the Speaker of the House, is trying to, to some extent, satisfy the personal aspirations and whatever of each member, right, then it's a lot harder to satisfy all those members. And what is actually happening, you're having pressure from one group of members of the House that's trying to get, and for lack of a better term, it's red meat issues, trying to get red meat issues passed.
Yeah.
And then you have them sending it up to the Senate, and the Senate rules allow those red meat issues to not necessarily come before the full Senate. And so now you have the pressure from members of the House on the leadership, and the leadership is now communicating with the Senate, who has rules that makes it a lot more difficult, and the people in the House really don't understand the difference. So I think it's a lack of understanding between the two bodies as to how the other body works. And personally, I like the rules of the Senate because there's a whole lot of stuff that doesn't ever need to see the light of day. But I'm just telling you the way it is. It really doesn't.
Yes. Yeah.
Because if we would focus on things that really help people, if we would just focus on that, we wouldn't have to do all of this, all of these different bills. One, and this is, first of all, let's establish who I am. I'm a born again child of God that believes that Christ died for my sins. So I'm not going to use the word Christian. I'm going to use the word I'm a child of God that believes Christ died for my sins, okay? But here we are wanting to put up, for instance, the 10 Commandments in school. Now, think about this. Our Bible tells us that you've got to have someone to explain what it means. You've got young, impressionable students walking around, see the 10 Commandments in the school posted. They go into their teachers and ask them, what does it mean? Okay, some teachers may not have the ability to explain what it means. You had the eunuch that had to have somebody, he was sitting there reading, and when he was asked, do you understand what this means? He said, how can I understand unless somebody can explain it to me? We're fixing and setting that position. And though, not that I don't believe that if there is somebody there to explain it, that it might not help. I do believe it could help. But If you don't have someone there that understands and can explain, then we're just creating more and more problems.
You
So
know, Representative, I think you brought up an interesting point that I never thought about, which is the varying ways of interpreting the Ten Commandments and other and other Bible passages for that matter. I'm also a born again believer like you, and I also am against the posting of the Ten Commandments in classrooms. In addition to the reason you just mentioned, I think we should also add some layers of clarification on top of what you just said. There's more than one version of the Ten Commandments because
exactly.
there's more than one version of the Bible. So you've got that. So which version are we even talking about? In addition to that, you have the very the indisputable reality that we live in a political culture and in a under a constitutional I'll say concept that says that we're supposed to keep church and state separate. We don't need schools promoting religion of any sort. Yeah, it's all right to teach about religion so that young people can understand, well, this is where Christianity came from, this is where Judaism came from, this is where Islam came from, etc. But to actually promote religion, that goes against the very spirit of the Constitution. Schools should not be in that business. But I'm glad you brought out that point. I want to ask you about something that Josh and I were discussing off mic, and that is the fact that you were in opposition to the budget that was just passed in the House, in part because funding was stripped for, if I'm not mistaken, the Birmingham Civil Rights Museum, the Alabama was it Jazz Hall of Fame or
Alabama Jazz Hall of Fame,
yeah, the Alabama Jazz Hall of Fame. And I think there was one other thing that you were
the
particularly
Magic City
concerned about.
Classic.
Yeah.
That's right, the Magic City Classic. So what I wanted to know is, Josh had heard that one of our Huntsville representatives up here, Senator Rex Reynolds, was going to see that at least some money was put back in for the Alabama Jazz Hall of Fame. Is that your understanding? And what about the Magic City Classic? And what about the Birmingham Civil Rights Museum?
We did go up and I did vote against the budget, and I told him I voted against the budget as it stood right then because it did not contain funding for those areas. But you had funding in all of the other areas that are primarily, um, for instance, Talladega. Talladega didn't get cut anything. You had, what is that? Barber Motorsports.
Mm-hmm.
All of those are things that were not cut, and some of them were actually increased. But everything that had something to do with the Black community and the things of real, cultural positioning for us
Right,
were cut.
right.
Now, I'm not, and that's what I didn't want to do is make anybody think that I'm trying to call you racist. I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to do that.
Okay,
But I don't want your actions to either begin to say that I should even think you are.
mm-hmm.
So those things, you can tell me they were taken out by mistake. Then it's incumbent upon you to correct the mistake.
Mm-hmm.
So you
So
think that's going to
yeah,
happen?
that's what I expect to happen. And
Okay, so you think
we,
Rex Reynolds is going to do that?
yeah, I do now.
Now, is he going to do it for all three of those entities or just for the Alabama Jazz Hall of Fame?
I think it'll be all three.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's weird to me that the mistakes keep only happening in one direction.
Yeah, yeah.
Is it
I
really weird? Is it really weird?
Hey,
Really, but
it's the same thing I told. We had some teachers in here this morning, and I was telling them how we have got to get more young black male teachers in our classrooms if we want to begin to change the dynamics of our society and our education system. Then we do need more black male role models in our classrooms. And because I was talking to a young black male teacher who happens to teach U.S. history and American history, as well as world history. And he and I were talking about it. He said something. He said, you know, if we don't get somebody else in front of our young men, then they don't know how to be young men of value. And I said, that makes a lot of sense. So, because think about it, teachers are going to spend what, 6, 7, 8 hours a day with our children for 180, 90 days a year, whatever it may be. I don't know. But they have a lot of influence. And so a problem I've had in our areas is when you go and address the leadership, they say, well, we can't find any any qualified now. That's this I call it this but what would you call it? To me it's a lightning rod when you use that word qualified. I
Yeah, it's
then
a dog
asked them,
whistle. It's
well,
a
where
dog
have you
whistle.
been
Yeah.
looking?
Right.
Where have you been looking?
Right.
Well, we have people that go over to Alabama, and I said, have you had anybody to go to Stillman? Have you
Right.
had anybody to go up
Right.
to Alabama A&M? Have you
That's
had
right.
anybody to go to Tuskegee? Do you have
That's
a
right.
relationship with anybody over at the Alabama State in the education department that you can call on and come out and recruit within those confines?
Right.
I said, if you don't ever go where they are, then they never know you have a position that's available. So
Uh-huh.
I think I think we've got to begin to speak up and say you're talking about we don't need diversity, equity, and inclusion. I said, well, in that case, just leave the equity out and let's have diverse inclusion. You know, if you just have diverse inclusion, then you don't have to worry about whether it's equitable or not.
mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah,
Huh. Interesting.
so
yeah.
you can take the E out as far as I'm concerned. But if you do the other stuff, if it comes naturally to you to diversify who you include in your circle, okay, here we go.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah, it's just uh, you hear the excuses constantly. First of all, I was going to ask too. I know you said there was a lot of teachers. I know it's AEA day around there. Have you mentioned to AEA that the rest of the session has been going on while you were there? Do they know that?
Well, they have declared this AEA day on the Capitol, so you have a lot of teachers that take off and come down and walk around and talk to their legislators. Um,
It would
and
have been nice for you to come down and talk to them before they passed that Choose Act. Um,
yeah,
and
you exactly.
somebody explained the horrors that are about to befall a lot of public schools just with
Yeah,
100 million. That's not to mention when they take that cap off in 2 years.
exactly. That's going to put a real stress on the average uh, person's education In other words, those of us that are in depressed areas, um, it's going to be hard to find enough money to take care of the needs of these areas. And we're going to see the areas lose more and more population. Therefore, we're going to lose more and more children in these areas. And see, I don't think people understand that. For instance, in Tuscaloosa County and counties that are around Tuscaloosa, for instance, Tuscaloosa County has they're at the minimum amount, a 10 mil tax. That's in Tuscaloosa County. You have them trying to pass an additional 10 mils in an election. It gets killed. Think about what Mountain Brook and Hoover and all of their millage rates are. When you look at those millage rates versus the millage rates in our areas, it's really appalling that you could think we would be able to produce the level of competition for the top teachers, as they put it, as those areas, because they are willing to fund the education in their areas. But when we try to do it out here, we have farmers and these big landowners are killing our opportunities to fund our education system.
Yeah, no, I mean,
So
Millbrook is. I mean,
we've
Millbrook,
got to, huh?
Mountain Brook has one of the highest ones, and each year, each 3 years or something along those lines, they have to go in and revote it, and every year they pass it. Every single year they repass it and continue to pay a higher rate.
Yes,
Now, but wouldn't you
yes,
argue,
and
or can it
that's
be
because
argued? Can it be argued, those representative that, and help me out here, because I mean, I want to see more and better teachers in the areas, the regions of our state that you're talking about. But aren't some of those areas and regions do they have the capacity to pay that higher millage rate?
I would truly say that they have the capacity because, for instance, in Greene County, you have 7,800 people. That's what they say is the number of people in the whole county. But that's a huge county that has a whole lot of land mass and a whole lot of trees. And guess what? The majority of that land is not owned by anybody that lives in Greene County.
Okay.
So the people that own the land are the ones that are basically making sure that the tax millage does not go up. If,
I see. Okay.
the capacity to pay those things, we have probably more high fence deer compounds over there in Greene County than you'd want to see.
Mm-hmm.
Those are people that generally don't live there. They have someone living on it to take care of it, and all they do is come in for recreation.
Got it. Got it. Got it.
So I believe the capacity is there, but the will is not there in terms of the people that own the land. I'm not saying the residents. They are the ones that vote on it, but then you get somebody with a lot of money and they put in a fear campaign and people shy away from voting for their own best interests.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, to kind of before we get you out of here and let you get back to the to the floor and do some business and to the meetings and things, where do you feel like the rest of this session? How do you feel like it's going to go? Do you feel like you could just get the budgets passed and get out of there?
If the friction gets hot enough, if it creates a fire, then people are going to be happy to get the budgets passed and get out of here. I think turned the temperature down a little bit yesterday in the Senate. But the fire, there's an underlying fire there that's still waiting to break out. They're just waiting on somebody to throw some gasoline on it. And I can, you know, if you throw the gasoline on it, then you're gonna have a major explosion.
Yeah.
And that's not going to be good for getting anything productive done.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, maybe
you may even see one down in the house before it's over.
Well, maybe we can get some the budgets passed and everybody can go and we'll get this thing handled. But thank you so much for hopping on and joining us today. And we're going to get you back on here. I don't care what all these other people say. You need to get a mic in front of you more often.
Well, hold on. I got somebody y'all need to see. Come here, sir.
Who's that?
Come here. Come here.
Oh, wow.
What?
Hey, what's up, Chris?
What's up, Chris?
Are y'all recording a podcast right now?
We are.
That's right.
Yes, we are.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's
this is
right.
the reason why nobody lets Representative McCampbell on a podcast. He just brings in his own guests as he's doing the podcast.
I did not know this was going on.
That's right.
This is not live, is it?
Well, yeah, it's not live necessarily, but it's definitely being recorded currently. Yes.
Yep.
They
You're
can cut
gonna
that
be our extra special guest, Chris.
Hey, thank you, Representative McCampbell. We really do appreciate you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for
All
joining
right.
us.
I appreciate it anytime.
All right.
All right.
Hey, we're gonna slide out of here. We're gonna come back in just a few minutes and wrap this baby up. It's Alabama politics this week. We're back in a minute with Josh, David, and whoever Representative McCampbell decides to get on with us next.
All right, then. We'll see y'all.
All right. Thanks, sir.
All right. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Alrighty. Welcome back. Alabama Politics this week. Josh, David Person. Thanks to the folks at Wind Creek Entertainment for sponsoring this. Thanks to the folks at Southern Poverty Law Center for sponsoring as well. And we have, matter of fact, going to have some folks on from the Southern Poverty Law Center next week and talk about some of their new publications about heritage and history. And they do a great job in a lot of those aspects, and also with their hate watch and other things that people rely on to keep track of some of the hate groups out there and to make sure that we're all up to date on things. And so, I wanted to, there were a couple of things I wanted to talk to you about before we got to the Rightwing Nut, which David picked the Rightwing Nut this week. And it's not the guy who killed Osama bin Laden. And so,
Hey, somebody sent me a message through Facebook saying that they agreed with me on that. So there's two of us. There's two of us in the whole country who feel that way.
You got two. And I will say, the guy that killed Osama bin Laden is a right-wing nut. So he is crazy. But yeah, speaking, we were talking earlier about, some people getting, healthy and all that kind of stuff. What I did Saturday.
Yes, sir.
This is so insane. We did a mud run. I allowed my wife to talk me into this mud run thing where you go. This one was at Madison Academy. They do a good job over there with this little mud run they have, and you go and you run basically a 5K, which that's not a problem. I do that basically every day. But then in addition to that, they add in obstacles and mud. And everything on my body has hurt for the last 5 days. It is, I mean, I work out all the time, but I guess I just don't do those sorts of things is all I can, and I guess I need to start changing up a little more because I mean, man, my shoulders hurt so bad. And I don't know, they've got like those little monkey bar things you're supposed to swing across or whatever. And so I did that. And maybe that's what got me. They also have a bunch of rope things that I I hurt so bad. And people have asked me, says like, what was your time? No idea. I mean, it's like, I started at one time, I finished at another. I don't know what my time was. I don't know. I finished, that's all that mattered. And I did not die. But it was just,
you didn't say that's key.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so God, and they had one part where you had to get in the water and go underneath these things. Oh, it was so cold. Oh my God. It was just, yeah.
And this was all on the Madison Academy campus?
Yeah. They've got a bunch of woods back there.
Oh, I see.
So
Okay.
Yeah. And so you kind of run through the woods and some fields. They had a bunch of, these crazy obstacles set up where you climb ropes.
Did you prepare? Did you have any kind of regimen to prepare for this?
I mean, I just did like what I normally do. I mean, like I said, I run all the time. I run, about 30 miles a week. And so, and so I felt like I was in pretty good shape, in addition to running, I also do, a workout routine at least 3 or 4 days a week. And so, I felt like I was in pretty good shape, for an old man. And, I don't know. It just was not pleasant. The last 5 days have not been pleasant. God, it hurts, man. But I guess that's just part of getting old. You can't do the things that you used to do.
It is part of getting old. I'm a few years ahead of you, and I can tell you it's a part of getting old, without question.
It's just, man, it bothers me so much that like you do. Like, yeah, I think back to like my youth or a little younger years, my younger years, the 20s or even into my 30s. And, there were things that I would do that it just didn't bother me. And now it's like, if you sleep wrong, the other day, I've got a shoulder that hurts so bad sometimes. And I went to the doctor about it. And he basically said, yeah, it's probably from driving. And I said, driving? What do you mean drive? Like this? This is what's causing my problem? This right here? Hey, I shouldn't have been doing this the whole time? I wish I'd have known that was going to be a problem. I would have stopped doing that. What? It's just like, and I was like, well, what could we do? And he's like, he said, it was like talking to a mechanic about an old car. He's like, you probably shouldn't put any more money into it. I don't know. It's just like, so, that's just, getting old, man, getting old. It just sucks. So,
but probably just some things you shouldn't do, or if you're going to do them, you just, like you said, you have to train in a different way for them, You know
what I'm bad at? You know what I'm really bad at?
What's that? Well, I started to ask you about that. Because stretching before and stretching afterward may have helped a little bit, It
probably would have. It probably would have done that. It probably would have helped me. I don't stretch. And again, it all goes back to me refusing to acknowledge the age at which I currently am. That's all it is. And which, by the way, I'll have a birthday on Monday. And so I'm adding another year to
it. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you. But yeah, I just, because the other thing that kills me is having to wear like proper shoes. It's like my search for proper shoes is never ending now because my knees and feet hurt. I was telling somebody the other day, when I run, I don't really get tired. Okay. Like I don't, my physically, how when you used to run or whatever, you after a while you just start, oh God, I guess that no longer really happens to me. What happens long before that is something on my body starts hurting so bad that I've got to stop. It's like, oh my God, my knee, what the hell's wrong with my knee? Or my hip, what's wrong? Oh, my hip's gone bad. And it's just, and I've got to stop. And so I do think that the stretching would probably help me, but I refuse to do it because for so long I would just show up to a basketball court, walk out and start playing.
That's what we used to do. What we used to do.
Yeah,
but you're now over 40. You can't do that anymore. You can't do it over. You just have to just get it out of your mind. Once you hit 40, things just automatically start changing. It seems like.
I just, man, for like my whole life, when you would go play pickup at like,
Mhm.
the Y or, wherever you would go and play, and there would be some old gray haired guy there, in
Mhm.
track pants and a Looney Tune t-shirt, who you knew was going to murder you with bank shots and elbows for the next hour and a half. I mean, that
Right,
dude was
right,
going to
back you
make you
down,
cry,
yeah.
basically, just killing you with fundamentals. But that dude,
Yeah.
before you would start, would go out and he would spend 30 minutes with like high knee raises and sitting in a corner doing the butterfly stretches and up against the wall with his, and it just, I never wanted to be that person, and I just refused to do it. And I think it's hurting me. And so I
Well,
don't know.
think about it like this, as I know we're going to move on to something else here in a minute, but think about it like this. The professionals who are still even in their 20s,
Yeah.
they do it. They stretch. They do all kind of stuff before they hit the court. They warm up extensively before they hit before the whistle blows.
Yeah.
If they have to, and they do stuff afterwards, many of them get in ice baths and whatever. If they have to do that,
Yeah.
come on, Josh, come on.
Yeah. I should, I just, I don't know. It just bothers me to some degree. I think it's the acknowledgement. I think doing that is an acknowledgement that, fuck it, you're old. You got to do it now. And it just, I don't know, man. It just, I just can't. But I mean, you're 100%. I read a story yesterday about C.D. Lamb saying it cost him $50,000 every other week for his health and wellness regimen. I was like, whoa, and he was like, well, there's 52 weeks in a year, so you do the math. And I was like, well, yeah.
And that probably includes not just working out, but nutrition and
Yes. Yeah.
everything. Yeah.
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 I mean, look, I mean, nutrition wise, I've accepted that. And look, there's, you won't meet anybody. I mean, maybe you're vegan and that, but I don't think anybody eats better than me. I do a lot of that, the cutting out of the red meat and the, all that. I mean, I do still do some red meat every now and then, but it's maybe once a month, once every other month, though I'll do a steak. But it's, no more hamburgers. I've learned to love turkey burgers, and, I do the fish and the chicken and, the salads and all that. And so I'm good with all
Good
that.
for you. Good for you.
But it's just, I don't know. I don't know why. I just feel like there is, I feel like it's hurting my pride. It's hurting my pride to have to stretch. Okay. I feel like I'm stretching my pride, David. I'm stretching my pride.
I'm hearing a lot of pride in this, definitely.
Yeah, right. Yeah, a lot of pride in me coming on here and talking about how bad my body is hurt for the last 5 days from one mud.
A lot of denial too. A lot of denial.
Yeah, you're right about that. There is a lot of denial. Speaking of denials, before we get to our right-wing nut, there is the latest in our sad saga of our attempts to get medical cannabis to the masses. The court denied last week ruled that the method under which the Alabama Medical Cannabis Commission issued its licensing December of 23 was invalid because they utilized an emergency rule in order to issue those licenses because they had been challenged in court 2 times previously and had to restart 2 times previous to that. And so they came in and implemented this emergency rule, which addressed a lot of the concerns in those lawsuits and some of the flaws that they had admitted to. It didn't address all of them, and it also kept in place those flawed scores and allowed the commissioners to use those flawed scores in order to determine who should receive a license, which was, of course, a problem for a lot of the people that were involved in that, the applicants I'm talking about, not just people, but the applicants. They said, well, hell, if they're flawed scores, you can't use flawed scores unless, of course, they got a license in which they said, they don't look all that flawed. Those scores look great. And so they sued and said, look, forget what the scores were. You can't use an emergency rule because there was no emergency. And the judge came back and said, well, yeah, under Alabama law, there's pretty clear standards for what constitutes an emergency. emergency, and you didn't meet any of those standards, and simply being sued by a lot of people does not constitute an emergency. And so we're back to square one, it seems, although I'm sure this is going to be sent to the civil appeals court and, to try to, overturn this decision. But I don't know how you could do that, really. I mean, it's the judge said, believes this, and the civil appeals court is not going to overturn that. I don't think. At this point, who the hell knows? And what I don't understand, this is what I don't get. All right. So the whole thing about this is them saying, all right, we don't want a bunch of dispensaries and a bunch of companies operating in one cluster, in Birmingham, in Montgomery, in Huntsville, in Mobile, whatever. We want to spread these things around the state. We don't want to issue out too many licenses and oversaturate the market in certain areas and have, weed, medical cannabis weed stores on every corner or whatever they're going to do. All right. So what I don't understand is why don't you just say to everybody, look, if you qualify, we're going to give you a license. However, we're going to give them according to the geography of the state, and we're going to award licensing in these different areas. And here's where we're going to divide this thing. We're going to divide it up by congressional districts. We're going to issue out seven different seven different congressional district licensing, and we're not going to give out more than two into every. So we're not going to give out a third license in any congressional district until we have at least two in all of the congressional districts.
Okay.
And just let everybody have a damn license who wants to have one, and let the market sort it out from there. I don't understand why we have to, why we're doing this, like this. Just let them have the license and let it work itself out.
Well, isn't this all just sort of a byproduct of a state and and more specifically, perhaps, a political culture that really still is resisting the idea of cannabis being legalized even for medical purposes? Isn't that really what this ultimately boils down to?
No, I don't think so. I think, honestly, let me tell you what I think it's about. I think it's about money. I think it's about greed and money and some people that were trying to grease the skids for certain groups of people. Now, I'm not going to name anybody or go into all this because, it would have to be, I'd have to lay out some pretty good details and a lot of back history and things like that. But I've studied this I think as well as anybody else in the media has, and I feel like, looking at it, given the long history that I have in this state of covering things like this, and watching how they've operated, I feel like somebody there was trying to manipulate the system to ensure one or two or maybe more companies or applicants received a license. And I feel like they did this I just don't think it's a mistake that you have in place guidelines. When those guidelines are the Alabama Administrative Procedures Act that covers how a limited number of licenses should be awarded. They outline this process. Everybody knows what this process is. It's not a secret. We had the guy on here that wrote the Alabama Administrative Procedures Act, and he talked about this. And it's not nobody should have been surprised to know that there was a process that should have been followed. And the fact that they were so adamant about not following that process, and then when they got caught not following the process, or they got called out in court for not doing it, they have still refused to follow that process all the way through. Now, I just feel like there's a reason for that. I feel like there is a reason that they are refusing to do that. And to date, no one has articulated any sort of a reasonable explanation for why they've done it. And so without that, I just feel like you're doing some shady stuff. And there's some other things that go into that as well that I've seen that people have talked about, and they've come through in different emails and things of that nature that have come to light. And I think that's what caused all this. And they've put themselves in this box, and people keep complaining about these folks filing the lawsuits, and they keep calling it sour grapes or whatever. Well, yeah, it's sour grapes. They wanted the license. They didn't get one. And so they found where you screwed up not following the law, and they've taken that to court, and a court said, well, they got a case, so we're going to have to do the X, Y, and Z.
I know you have covered this extensively. I can't think of anybody who's done more reporting on it than you have. So I would defer to you on this, that money's the ultimate, I guess I'll say the ultimate culprit here. And I can understand why, because they see that this is going to be a cash cow. So people
Yes.
are trying to ensure up front that they get the piece of the pie that they want. The thing that's interesting about this to me, though, is from sitting, way back from the table, somebody who has not done any real reporting on this and who has no real stake in this at all. I find it fascinating that we've now been engaged in this extremely protracted process for what, at least 5 years, 6 years? I've even
Going on
lost
5 years now. Yeah.
Okay, I was going to say I've really lost track, but it seems like it's around 5 or 6 years, something like that. And we're not any closer, it seems, to getting this resolved. So the people that are trying to, based on your reporting and your logic, who are trying to, sort of jerry rig the system in their favor, they only seem to be hurting themselves in the long run because they're just prolonging their ability to cash in. And in the meantime, while they're doing that, the downside is, that there are people in this state who really could benefit from medical marijuana. There are people in this state who have chronic, debilitating diseases or conditions who could use that. But all of this upfront jockeying is hurting those people, and that's really where my concern is.
Yeah, no, and I think that's where the concern of a lot of people lies, and and that's absolutely true. And I think what a lot of these people look at is that most people assume, and I think rightfully, that this is the first step towards recreational marijuana in the state of Alabama, and I think
Sure it is.
and it'll ultimately come in probably sometime in the next 10 years, assuming we can ever get this thing right. But it's just going to be. Yeah, it's a shame that they've done it this way. It's a shame that no one has stepped in. And I'll say, to your point about maybe being resistant to it, or I just think indifferent to it. I feel like had there been there should have been some intervention from the governor's office, from the legislature before now. That somebody should have stepped in and removed the folks at the top of the AMCC. They should have made them replace the attorneys that have caused some of these problems. I feel like, because it's a mess. It is an absolute mess. No one can deny they have screwed this thing up in terms of the process for licensing that they've set up. And I mean, and so when you're not then going back and fixing it in with some urgency, then you're further dropping the ball, and that's a got to go situation. You got to go, man. You got to get somebody else in there to fix this, and they haven't done it, and it's and they keep falling back on this with sour grapes, and they just keep these judges, activists, and all, and it's bull, man. It's just if there wasn't a legal leg to stand on, they wouldn't be here at this point.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you one other question, because you said you were wondering about why the governor hasn't gotten involved. That's where I go back to my original point, which is, isn't there some sort of a resistance because of the ongoing sort of, problems that many people have with the very idea of marijuana being legalized, even for what we would say are ostensibly really altruistic reasons, which, talking about people, medical cannabis.
Yeah. I don't get the sense that it's that. I get the sense more of there's just kind of an indifference to this process. And it's kind of the same way with gambling as well, where there's not really now at this point, there's not really that same sort of resistance that people have to it. They're not turned off by it like they once were because of the moral implications or what have you. But there's just kind of all right, let them do whatever they want to do. So you know what I mean. It's that sort of a thing, and so I think that has played a bit of a role in this. But also politics has played a bit of a role. They put John McMillan at the top of this thing, and everybody likes John McMillan. Fine, he's been around for a long time, and I think honestly, KIV has been hesitant to embarrass him, although I don't know how much more embarrassing it could get for him. And so I think that's part of the problem, though, is the politics of this, and but also that indifference. I think if we were just talking about something happening with Blue Cross Blue Shield, that they would have fixed this thing a while back, and they haven't, and so we'll see. Yeah, we'll see if it ever makes it, but I don't know. I'll be interested to see what happens with this. Now if the legislature is going to try to act in its final days here to get something passed to just hand out licenses and get this thing done, because I think everybody at this point sees that this thing ain't moving. It ain't moving at all, man. So, Rightwing Nut is, as I said, this is all you this week.
Yeah. So I learned, AL, I think this is, AL.com published a story about Donald Trump once again finding a way to monetize the presidency for his own benefit. And this time it is through the production by the Trump Organization, which is his business arm. So we're not even talking about the political side of Trump Inc. We're talking about clearly the business side of Trump Inc. is now marketing a hat that they're calling the Gulf of America hat. Apparently they launched it this past weekend, and I'm looking at it now. It's got what I call the MAGA red, along with a white sort of backdrop for the words Gulf of America. Got a couple of palm trees on it. Got 5 stars. Don't know why the 5 stars are there, for whatever reason. And then the words "yet another Trump development," which really encapsulates, I think, the essence of how Trump sees the presidency. He sees it as an opportunity to monetize various aspects of American life and culture for the benefit of his business. And here we go again. The Gulf of America baseball cap, which, by the way, you can get for the low, low price of $50.
Jimmy Carter divested from his peanut.
Yeah.
From his peanut.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Trump not only has this, I read a story, pretty lengthy story, that was making the case that the thing that people should be most outraged about right now is the fact that foreign governments can pay him basically directly for favorable decisions through
with
his
crypto
Bitcoin operation.
That's right.
And it's all a grift, man. It's always been a grift. It's all. Yep. It's the $2 billion to Jared and Ivanka. It's the endless deals for all of their bitching and moaning about Hunter Biden selling paintings or whatever it was that they're complaining about with Hunter Biden. No family has been bigger. They would have stolen the shit off the walls if they could have to sell it. All right. And literally did steal the documents out of there that he wanted to sell. That's all this has been about. And it's all it's ever going to be about. It's just
been from Jump Street. That's what it's been. It's been Trump Inc. And I remember I said that on Facebook years ago, of course, when this whole thing started. And one of my childhood friends, who is a African-American Trumper, was just enraged that I would say such a thing. And yet the years have proven, and not that I'm some really super smart guy. I mean, it was obvious. Yeah. You didn't have to be smart to see this, or well-read to see this, or in the journalism or media business to see this. It's been freaking obvious from the beginning. This was all a graft, a grift, all about Trump monetizing the presidency, and then monetizing the presidency and trying to stay out of jail. That's what this has all been about. All of it. The whole thing. It's been obvious.
You're right. It's all it's all it is. It's all it ever was. All it's ever going to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Let's get out of here.
All right,
Until
man.
next week, y'all be safe out there.
Peace.